Hello, my beautiful people. How are you doing today? I hope you're doing good. Hi, my beautiful people. How are you doing today? I hope you're doing good. I have decided I will be doing live conversations every day, maybe at 3 p.m. West Africa time, every day. And we'll be talking about different principles on winning in life and destiny and business. Because that's all I'm going to be about, and that's all I'm about. Today, we're going to talk about the secret of alignment. Over the years, if it is in business, you would hear businesses and business people talk about who do you have in the team, what kind of team do you have, who is your co-founder, um, what who is leading this product, who is your sales marketing person, who is, in other words, who have you brought in alignment with you as pertaining to this vision. Now, I was just in a place of contemplation one of these days, and the study or the story of Abraham and Lot popped in my mind and in my spirit. And for the first time, I'm realizing even deeper how powerful the subject of alignment is. Now, when we look at Genesis 12, verses 4, this is when Abraham was being called out, you know, to venture into a new land, to go into a new city. In other words, this is a season where you, as an individual, you're figuring things out. You're starting something new, you're starting a business, you're exploring a direction of your life, and that's your call. You've been called out to venture into the new. One of the most dangerous mistakes that we have normally made and we barely speak of in life and in business is the mistake of misalignment. I've written here in my notes, so I'll be using my notes a lot. It's the mistakes of misalignment. We have seen in leadership, whether it's in political leadership and business leadership, how bringing one person can completely change something for the good or completely for the bad. And you'll be wondering, what did I just do? What happened? You see. Or we see it in politics where one would say, we are pairing these two political leaders in a political campaign because this one, as much as they're good, they're good in this, but this one has the hearts of people. This one can buy more. It sort of becomes some sort of sympathetic sometimes, but it's simply saying the alignment, putting these and these in alignment together will result to better results. Now let's look at the story of Lot and Abraham. When the call to come out of the land of his father's house came to Abraham, Lot, we're not told Lot was anywhere near it. But by the time we're reading Genesis 13, verses 5 to 7, we're seeing that no, when we're reading Genesis 12, rather, verses 1, Abraham is being called at. By verses 4, Abraham is leaving. This is what the scripture says. So Abraham went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. You see, So the one who had the vision, the one who had the assignment, the one who had the instruction was Abraham. But Lot decides to align himself and go with him. You see, by the time we come to see in Genesis 13, verses 5 to 7, we're seeing, let me just read it to you. Now, Lot, who was moving about with Abraham, you see, now Lot, who was moving about with Abraham, also had flocks, had herds, and had tents. When we read when Lot was leaving, we're only told what Abraham had. The only thing we're told about Lot is that he was Abraham's nephew. In other words, we're not so sure if when they were leaving, Lot had anything at all. Anything at all. We're not so sure. But by the time they're leaving, he had cattle, he had herds of all sorts of animals, he had flocks and herds and tents. In other words, he had houses. He became a land. Sorry, just a minute. I want to adjust the lightning a bit. You see, he had all of these things that he didn't have before he joined Abraham. But the land, now this is what the verse 6 says, chapter 13. But the land could not support them while they stayed together, for their possessions were so great that they were not able to stay together, and quarreling arose between Abraham's herdsmen, and Lot's. The Canaanites and the Perizzites were also living in the land at the time. So hear me out. One man is called out, one man receives a vision, one man receives a roadmap towards a certain destination, towards a certain possibility. And then another man, whether he hears of it or somehow just decides, I like this person, I'm going to join them in whatever venture they're venturing into, decides to go along with them. And this is what an interesting part of this happens, that by simply aligning with Abraham, it looks like everything that was Abraham had somehow trickled down to Lot's, and Lot started being an owner of the same things that Abraham had, became so great that the land, the space, that in the company, it looked like they were of the same, they were commanding the same authority. In the organization, it looked like they were commanding the same authority. In the industry, it looked like they were commanding the same authority. This is one of the things that happens in growth. In a growth of many of us, even in family sometimes, when you're young, you can bear with things here and there. But after some time, it kind of starts to feel somehow. Mm, you're not so sure if you should really continue to do that thing anymore, and things like that. And you decide, you know what, I think I'm grown up, I think I'm going to look for my place. Now, this was not even the case of Lot fighting his uncle. It was his servants, the people he had employed, the people who came in as a support system that didn't know the agreement that was there before, didn't know anything. This can actually apply in marriage as well. Anyway, didn't know anything. They're the ones that started to have misunderstanding. And the Bible says that when that started to happen, Lot was like, I'm a man of peace. I don't like quarreling. This looks like a little bit too much. Um, I'm ready to release you. I'm okay with you moving on, and all of that. And in verse 8, it says, So Abraham said to Lot, Let's not have any quarreling between you and me, or between your headsmen and mine, for we are closer relatives. Is it not the whole land before you? Let's part company. If you go to the left, I'll go to the right. If you go to the right, I'll go to the left. Lot looked around and saw that the whole plain of the Jordan towards Zoar was watered like garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So Lot chose for himself the whole plain of Jordan set towards the east. Two men departed company. Now listen to this very much. Abraham lived in the land of Canaan, while Lot lived among the cities of plain and pitched his tents near Sodom. Lot came with nothing, aligned himself with Abraham. Within a short period of time, he had this massive wealth. And all of a suddenly, there is misunderstanding. And Lot was like, and Abraham was like, I like peace. Um, I'm ready to release you. You can choose whatever you like, anything you want. You want this, just go. And Lot decided to choose the best for himself. One of the things that is telling me is that Lot may have been a bit selfish because he didn't think of Abraham at all. He didn't think of, okay, let's divide, half of the best lands. Let me take part of it, let me leave you part of it. No. He chose the what he had perceived was the best side and left. The interesting part is what comes next. Before the fact that Before we speak of what happened to Lot, let's speak of what happened to Abraham the moment Lot left. The Bible said, and the Lord said to Abraham after Lot had parted from him. Literally from chapter 12, we see the Lord speaking to Abraham. We don't see the Lord saying anything to Abraham after that. And then the moment Lot leaves, the Lord comes back and speak to Abraham. And this time it wasn't just an instruction, it was a blessing, a covenant that lasted generations. In other words, Abraham had aligned with himself someone, because when you read the meaning of Lot in Hebrew, it means a veil, something that covers, had aligned with himself, had entered into alignment that would not allow him to access the one that gave him the strategy in the first place, to access the very ability to be bigger than what he was, to access his next level, that the one he had aligned to made him remain where he was in that season until they had to part ways. So you see why alignment is a very sensitive subject as far as life, destiny, and business is concerned. The kind of people you partner with, the investors you bring on board, the executive teams you bring on board, the teams you bring on board, have the ability to either keep you where you are, or, like Lot in this case, have the ability to bring you from 0 to 100, from 100 to 1000. So the matter of alignment is extremely sensitive. Now, when we realize that after Lot separated from Abraham, the next was Abraham getting to hear from the Lord. But there is another flip side of it, is that the next thing we even hear of Lot is Abraham coming to rescue Lot out of trouble. There's some alignment, some relationships that sit as a cover around our lives, maybe because of the wise counsel that they give us, and we don't realize it. Maybe because of the kind of influence they have, the kind of maturity whether they have in the realm of the spirit or in the physical. As a business person, you partner with this bank or you partner with this company, and for as long as your partnership is there, you realize that the business is doing great. And this happens a lot, that there are certain partnership, the moment you partner with them, things just skyrocket. And there are certain people, the moment you bring them on board, things just get stuck somewhere. See, by the end of it, Lot's name, by the end of Genesis, by the end of the story of Lot and Abraham, Lot's name was associated with failure, loss. By the time they're getting him, because he got him out of trouble from the five kings when he was in Sodom, and then later came to get him out of trouble when there was judgment pronounced over Sodom. So by the end of it, Lot's name was associated with failure, loss, iniquity, and then a wife that ended up turning into souls, and tribes that fought the people in the agenda of God. That is how bad misalignment can be. Whether it is you misaligning yourself from the right people or you aligning yourself with the wrong people. So same we see with the apostles, for instance, when we look at Acts 13 verses 2. God calls for a separation of both Paul and Barnabas. And then he was clear that because he wanted to send them. So the two of them were separate, were set apart, were called apart, were given a vision, were given an assignment like Abraham. But there were two of them. And from there to Acts 15, we see the exploits they did together. They did amazing. They were like two musketeers. We keep on seeing apostles, Paul and Barnabas, apostles, Paul and Barnabas. And by the time we get to Acts 36, there is a snag there. And there was a disagreement that happened, and Barnabas decided to separate from Paul. And then Paul says, okay, the assignment was meant to be done by two people, so I'm going to take Silas. The next thing we see is the history is no longer speaking of Paul and Barnabas, but Paul and Silas. And we only hear of Paul. We don't hear of Barnabas anymore, the exploits he ever did. We don't even know. Maybe if you read extra biblical texts, but we don't even know what happened to Barnabas. No, the exploits or the impact he ever had in the world after that. On the other hand, as the same thing I said, that when we read in Genesis 13:14, we realize that God only spoke to Abraham and got him into a new dimension of his promise after he separated from Lot. So alignment and alliance is such a sharp two-edged sword, but one side can be blunt, or one side is blunt. So if you align with the wrong people, you're in trouble. But the other one is very sharp, meaning it can be very useful. This alignment that I'm talking about is more than strategic relationships. These are divine decisions you make that decide if your business, if your organization, or if you're going to have a good legacy as far as family life is concerned, simply because of who you choose to align with. Tell me what you think. The assignment for this is sit down, write down every genuine relationships that you have and start praying over them to know which alignment is genuinely good for you and which one may not necessarily be good. And also assess yourself if you even have good alignments in the first place. If you really have the Abrahams in your life, if you have the Pauls in your life. Until tomorrow, I'll see you again. Bye.